I'm here.
Is Councilmember Waring on by phone?
Councilmember Waring, are you out there?
He may not have joined yet, Mr. Mayor.
I am. All right, so I'll go ahead and call us to order and ask y'all to join me in a moment of silence of prayer. Amen.
Amen.
Thank God for another beautiful day. All right, so we have some departmental budget discussions today, planning, public service, parks. We're going to have an update on our stimulus funds, a little tweak to what our report was before. And but we'll start with the planning department budget, but I'll turn it on over to Amy, I think. Amy? You are on mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry about that.
There you go.
The mayor just kind of went over the agenda, so I don't think I need to do that. I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the
Yes.
first department that we're going to hear from is Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability. So I will turn this over to Robert Somerville. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I know that he has his a presentation he wants to share.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the committee. So real quick, I am going to start sharing. Hopefully you all can see. I have a PowerPoint up. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. Really quickly, I just want to go through the planning department's budget request, and then I'm prepared to answer any questions that you all might have about what our request is and what we're hoping to accomplish in next fiscal year. Real quick, as someone who just passed their 6 months on the job, I wanted to take a moment and just remind everybody what the Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability Department does. Our mission is pretty simple. Our goal is to improve the built environment and the quality of life for all people in the city of Charleston. We've been doing this this year with the 3 focus areas of waterproof, inclusive, and balanced. And you can see there on the right-hand side of the screen some of those core functions. They include restoring and protecting our historic neighborhoods, facilitating new neighborhoods and compact mixed-use neighborhoods, excellence in design, again, making sure that Charleston remains Charleston and not, as I think we've all seen it in editorials and in the paper, anywhere USA. Ensuring that what we are doing is environmentally sensitive and appropriate, and using our comprehensive plan as our guiding document, as the community's plan, and touching on all the different things that we do as a city. And making sure that we're always keeping that in mind as we're moving forward. Wanted to just remind everybody, this is your team. You have a small but mighty planning department here at the city of Charleston. This team facilitates and supports more than 110 public meetings per year. And you all as council members, you know how grueling public meetings can be. That's 110 meetings outside of what support the department does for actual city council and committee meetings. These are just the meetings of the various boards and committees that the planning department supports. In addition to those public meetings, they handle more than 8,000 applications through the different review bodies that we have. Additionally, we have more than 125 community meetings, outreach events that we either support, lead, or participate in. And then finally, with our design division, we produce on average 22 city design projects that we either lead or participate in annually, which is a monumental amount of work when you think about what private sector design firms have available to them. So just some table setting there before we go into the ask. I prefaced this budget overview for the planning department with basically this statement, and again, a reminder that we are an evolving community. We are a historic city, and in order to keep those two things in balance, we need planning, and we need the value that planners and the planning profession brings to this community. So what I've done in this proposal for our next budget year, I've put our request into 3 buckets, if you would. One is restoration. A second one is dealing with our people. And finally, we do have some projects that we are making some budget requests for. We all know how important restoration is. I think our amazing CFO talked about this at your ad hoc committee earlier this year about the fact that restoration of some of the hits that our budgets took during this COVID pandemic situation was going to be a main topic. We have, as I'm sure every department in the city, we have requested restoration of funds for specific programs. Those restoration requests amount to just a little over 1% of our total 2022 requests. They are just a little over 0.5% of an increase over our 2021 budget. And they do represent, with restoration of these line items that we've requested, it still amounts to a 8.3% decrease over what was approved for the department in the 2020 budget. So we think that these are important to get us back to a semblance of a baseline of services that we provide to the community, particularly in light of the hope and expectation that we will be in 2022 much more, again, out in the community, doing things in person, and a lot less virtual things. For people, this represents about just under 18% of the budget, the request here in terms of the increase. It is a almost 11% increase over the 2021 budget. But because of the cuts from the 2020 budget, it actually represents just about a 1% increase over what the 2020 budget was for the people portion. This people portion includes a few new positions that I believe will help the planning department better support the missions and objectives of the city in general, but also the other departments in the city. Specifically, our top priority is to get an additional position for an associate preservation planner who would be working in an enforcement officer capacity, at least in part. I have heard loud and clear in the 6 months that I've been here that this is an area of our efforts that we're lacking on, in part because we're trying to take care of all the day-to-day stuff, and we're just not able to take care of those areas of our historic older city in our historic districts that we're having some difficulties with in terms of keeping up with the enforcement activity. I would point out that this position would generate revenue in that it would bring properties that are currently out of compliance with the requirements, many of which don't know that they're not in compliance. It would serve both in an education capacity to let them know what those requirements are under the code, but then it would bring them in so that they'd be supplying the appropriate applications and what have you. So there would be some revenue that would come from their efforts. Additionally, looking for a new urban designer in our design division, an application coordinator. One of the things that I found since I've been here is that while we do have a very small team, our professionals are spending a lot of time on administrative tasks associated with taking in our applications. That's taking them away and taking longer for them to complete reviews, to get permits out the door, to get items that are scheduled for our different boards and committees, to get them on agendas, because they're spending a lot of time on the more administrative tasks of taking in those applications, following up with applicants on missing documentation, things like that. So I'm proposing an application coordinator. I think that that will create a lot of efficiency within the system. Then one of the things, and I know you heard from the Human Resources Committee recently on some of the issues related to why we are seeing some turnover in the city staff. And while I think a lot of those issues that are aggregate to the city do apply in the department, two things that I've heard repeatedly from folks that have left, and we have had some departures in the 6 months that I've been here, is concern over workload and concern about professional development. One of the things that's somewhat unique to planners is oftentimes, while we all want a nice paycheck, let's be clear, the reality is most of the people who go towards a planning profession they want to stay relevant in that work. And so professional development is another a key piece of what I believe will help not only improve our current staff, but also help in that retention of that staff and in our recruitment efforts for when we do need to replace positions. So I have requested money that will help with the development of training and development of our staff. Additionally, we've also requested, or I'm requesting in this budget, an annexation coordinator. I think we are poised with some of the new programs that have come online for the city to make a case for some of our little islands within the city, that it's now time to go out to the community and talk about the benefits of being a city resident. In fact, we have many people who are in the county who don't realize they're not in the city. And so that position would help address that. And again, long-term, that has positive revenue impacts. So this would be what the org chart would look like if these positions were approved. It'd be an additional position in our design division that would bring that up to 3 people. The annexation coordinator would work with our folks in our planning division. And then we would be looking at the application coordinator. Right now, we're kind of putting him in preservation, but I don't believe their work would be limited to just preservation. We would be looking to have them work on multiple boards and commissions and help with those administrative tasks. And then, as mentioned previously, that associate preservation planner / enforcement officer.
Robert, before you go to the next slide, I'm glad to see the request for annexation coordinator. And I hope that person has in mind to be somewhat aggressive to cover these pockets that are out there, particularly in West Ashley, in my district, and I think also, well, probably in all the older districts in West Ashley. Avondale has a huge pockets of area that are not annexed into the city, and it really just makes for bad government when it comes to planning, that we have these pockets of residents not within the city jurisdiction. So I'm hoping that person will be somebody who's going to be a lot of energy, I guess, and vision, because part of this is a sales job, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a marketing job. They're marketing the benefits of being in the city and creating that continuity on those streets. Councilmember Jackson and I, we've had this conversation on Folly Road. We have city, county, city, and how on earth do we do the improvements that we collectively want to see in that space when we have multiple jurisdictions that may not always see eye to eye on exactly what those requirements may be.
And I would like, if this budget is approved and we get this coordinator, for that person to work with council members so we can discuss with that person exactly what we're looking for, some areas we'd like them to be targeted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to be clear there, because one of the conversations that has been had about that, this position would focus on those islands. This is not trying to look at huge swaths. This is not the next, Cane Hoy annexation. This is knitting together the city in those areas where we have this kind of patchwork situation with, non-city properties intermixed with city properties.
And by the way, I like that very first photograph you had of the view of the work on the low battery. Whoever got that picture, well done.
So, and then the last group, and this is the lion's share of the ask. These are project dollars. Most of this is one-time expenses. So as we're thinking about opportunities to fund one-time expenses, these would be some of the projects that I would ask that we keep in mind. As we are completing the process for council, hopefully within the next couple meetings, to adopt the new city plan. That city plan, if adopted, will create some holes that we need to fill in our planning strategy. And that's kind of why this picture, this is the first picture. It's also kind of the last picture here, because I want us to think about the fact that if we adopt that comprehensive plan, there are next steps. That's not the end of a road. That's the beginning of a road. And one of those big projects is going to be a new zoning ordinance. It's imperative that we work on that. Additionally, I want to make it clear to the committee, we have a truly talented staff here, but the ask on a new zoning ordinance is not something that unless we set everything else aside that we are working on, that is not something that we are going to be able to do in-house. Further, a elevation-based zoning approach has been done in a very limited set of circumstances anywhere in the world. So again, the expertise needed to help consult with the city on that is going to be vital in order to make that effort work. And then finally, our zoning code, for anyone who's actually sat down with our zoning code, they know that our zoning code is incredibly complicated. It has been amended and then amended and then amended again. And so we need to take it all the way back down to the foundations and build that back up instead of trying to amend within our existing code structure. So this is a very important project. A new downtown plan. Again, the current downtown plan was created over 20 years ago. There has been so much change on the peninsula and what is thought of as downtown since that plan was done. When we are looking at the impacts of the perimeter protection, when we're looking at the changes that have happened, how are we more comprehensively doing affordable housing on the peninsula, bringing folks that have been displaced back? I think that downtown plan is going to be vital to those efforts. We also, a couple other things here in the projects category. We need to do an update to the historic properties survey. It's woefully out of sync with where we're at today. So we need to update that. Again, it's an update. It's not adding new neighborhoods to the current categorizations, but it's updating the status of our historic properties. So with that, here's essentially the summary of what we have. We are asking for approximately a little over $1.8 million in additional budget. However, again, I'm going to point out that $1 million of that is for the zoning code. That could be allocated over, it's going to be a multi-year project, so it could be allocated over 2 fiscal years if necessary. Additionally, on the downtown plan, that's going to be a more than 1 fiscal year. I think it's going to be closer to an 18-month project. So that could have funding allocated over more than 1 fiscal year. I also want to highlight on the downtown plan, similar to what we did with the comprehensive plan, that $350,000, that's part of what that plan will entail. We have an amazing staff here that will basically carry the weight for half of that project. That project in reality will probably be about a $700,000 project, but I feel like we have capacity within the talent of our staff to cover about half of that project with our internal labor within our planning division and with some assistance from our design division. So with that, this is our request. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And Amy, hopefully I didn't take too long.
Nope, that was perfect.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilmember Jackson?
Yeah, thank you. This is probably an Amy question. So I appreciate, Robert, everything you've presented to us. It's the most comprehensive look at your big elephant that you have to get your hands around on different parts every day. So my Amy question is, of the two big ticket items that you told us would take more than one fiscal year, so the ordinance rewrite and the downtown plan new right, basically. Amy, does that mean that, are these general fund expenses, or would we put them in some other sort of, I don't know, project designation that doesn't really go into the general fund?
No, these are general fund items.
And then in 2 years, we just expect a decrease. Is that?
That is
Is that right?
correct. I mean, if you do it over 2 years and you're committing those 2 years.
Right, but at the end of year 2, and we expect that those numbers would come out of this budget. I mean, maybe there would
That's
be
right.
something else, but it would be a different line item.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? Well, Robert, thank you for that presentation. Very concise, very clear. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good
No
work.
problem. Thank you all. And I'm
Mhm.
available if there's any questions from any of the committee members outside of the budget meeting that need some follow-up.
Well, now Councilmember Shea raises his hand.
Well, just as a follow-up, that Robert, what is the overall, I saw the number of the increase that you want. What does that represent percentage-wise of an increase?
That represents a total increase, I believe it's on your priority worksheet that that Amy's team handed out. I apologize. I had it and somehow I've closed the form that had that information.
I can go back and double check that. Okay, it's on there. It's on.
Yeah, it should be at the bottom of that priority sheet.
It's on there.
It is, yeah.
It's 46.22% of 2020 and 60.55% of 2021.
I'm sorry, Amy, say that one more time.
46.22% of 2020 and 60.55% of 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Appel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Robert. Excellent presentation. And I just want to say that we really need to make this a priority this budget cycle. You know, as Robert said, we have a very complicated zoning ordinance, and that's in addition to very stringent stormwater regulations and things we're not even talking about right now. It is very, very, very difficult, expensive, time-consuming to do business and do projects in the city of Charleston right now, unfortunately. And a lot of that is just due to certain factors outside of our control. There's also certain things we can do. We can write a zoning ordinance that's more streamlined and efficient. We can hire more folks to process these applications and help move things through the process. But this is a big priority, because when we talk about things like affordable housing and all the other goals that we have as a city, we have to have a department that's capable and resourced sufficiently to make these things happen. So this is very important. I saw a lot of things that I was looking for in that presentation. Frankly, I think we probably need a whole lot more people, but I think Robert's being very conservative here, because I think we don't have unlimited funds and resources, but I think that this is a very important department, very important series of requests, and I look forward to seeing what's to come in the future. Thank you.
All righty.
Mr. Mayor, I would just, I would add to Councilmember Appel's, statement, the compelling nature of the two big expenses, definitely the rewrite of the zoning ordinance, and from a different aspect of its importance. I mean, a huge part of our new city plan that we're going to be adopting soon is the whole land and water analysis that goes along with all of the other work that we've tasked ourselves to do, and the stormwater department creation, I feel bad that basically our stormwater manual has sort of been the zoning tool that we've had in play for the last year and a half. We need to have zoning that reflects the knowledge that we now have from the city plan and all of the consulting work and the expertise of our staff that went into that. If we don't start to rezone in order to protect our territory from the climate, then we'll be negligent of doing our own responsibilities, in my opinion.
Right. Robert, let me ask you a question. You mentioned that the zoning rewrite could be done over 2 years. And it's clear that's a big, big job. And we want to, as long as we've had this collection of zoning ordinances, we want to get it right. So just curious, given your resources and people and staff, is it preferable to do it over 2 years? Or, I mean, if we don't have all the money in the world, but if we did, I mean, would doing it in a year be a easy thing to do or a doable thing? Follow me?
Yeah, I do. So doing it in a year would be doable. From the folks that I spoke with that I know that do this work out in the community. In order to do it in less than a year, it raises the price because they then have to hire additional expertise to help them crunch it into a shorter period of time. A 2-year mark means that they can incorporate the work into their existing staffs generally, from the folks I talked to. But yeah, if we had potentially additional funding, again, we could put it out for RFP at $1 million for 1 year and see what responses we got. But from the folks I talked to, because I wanted this number to be real, I didn't want to come to you with a number and then have to come back to you in 6 months and say, oh, I got that number really wrong. I need to up it. Based on those conversations I had with multiple folks that do this work, the workload requirement stretched over 2 years makes that $1 million work. Something shorter, even at 18 months, shorter, or 18 months, only cutting off 6 months of the project would make it more expensive because they'd have to hire some additional short-term resources themselves in order to make it work.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that seems like a no-brainer to try to do it over the 2-year period to me. And I'm sure Amy will adjust the numbers accordingly. Great, thank you. All right. Amy, you want to call up, or you want me just to call up Tom next? We're doing public service next.
Yes, Mayor, we are. So I don't really have anything so that Tom can get started if you'd like.
Yep.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Good afternoon. Want to just take a brief time. I didn't have a PowerPoint as Robert. But just kind of briefly remind everybody what our duties are in public service. You know, we have the administrative division, and also we have our building inspection / permit center, engineering, environmental services, which consists of garbage, trash, and our street sweeping. And then we also have the fleet, and we have the streets and sidewalks division. So we've got technical and operational items in both, and our budget request reflects what we feel is necessary to not only continue, but to improve those services to our citizens. We had a very good meeting this morning with city staff, incorporating several department members of different departments, talking about an issue with collection of trash and garbage downtown. We have limits and things that cause us problems, such as our tight streets and people having cars in the way of collection. But it's just another example to me of us working together. We had Dan Riccio and Susan Petit, and Tracy was helping us. So that's a way we just continue to solve these problems. And sometimes try and solve them without spending additional money, just using some thought and good common sense. And one thing that we're working on, that the mayor and Councilman Waring and Councilman Rappel were up, our environmental services ordinance in the budget, in the city code, has really not been updated in a while. And we're looking at making some changes, mainly some for clarification, but for others that when we have missed pickups and then also multiple pickups, large bulk piles, mainly of trash with leaves and debris like that, looking at some additional fees that would maybe make those services available, but also not just continue to burden our staff. So that's something we'll be coming to council with in the fall, with hopes for approval in the starting in January. Going over our budget, what I thought I would do is just kind of highlight the request sheet you have in front of me, the new programs. A lot of the old stuff we're looking for are just restoration of cuts made last year during a very difficult 2021 budget process. And I'll be glad, obviously, to answer questions on those. But starting, our number one priority that I feel that will really help our operation, when we split the stormwater department from public service back in the fall of 2018, and it's been a tremendous opportunity for both departments. I think, Matt and I continue to work well together, and even though they're separate departments, they're still very interrelated with their plan review and enforcement and things like that. And it's a great, it's two great teams continue to work together. An example today, we had the remnants of Indy come through, and our streets and sidewalks guys who normally out there repairing sidewalks were on what we call rain event, where they're assisting stormwater crews cleaning outfalls and things like that. So we just continue to try and have that type of relationship, and that's very important. But one thing that happened when we did split the departments, and I took over as director, lost at one time Mike Mester, who a lot of people remember, was a great employee for 20 years with the city, was our deputy director of operations. And I feel we're reaching a point in our operation where the restoration of that position would be really important to us. There's several things going on. One thing we're trying to do, we're meeting monthly almost, Ben and myself and Tracy and Susan and Katie McCain. And we're trying to really get our fleet clean. And there's opportunities. Unfortunately, we tried, everybody remembers, we tried to get 2 electric garbage trucks this year. And we just found out recently that we did not win that grant. However, that does not stop us. We're going to continue to move forward and reapply for that. And we've talked to some people, and the people that actually did the grading, to find out what we need to do to improve that process. So we're going to continue to work on that. Those are some really exciting vehicles. There's also some light vehicles in our fleet, which, can we have electric or liquid gas and things like that. And working with that, I just feel that if we have somebody can work with those items and continue with Ben and his expertise, there's some things going to be available on state contract for us to buy that are non-standard. And we just want to continue to do that. Plus, we have so many programs that have opportunities to reduce our waste stream. One thing I'm going to hit on later on in this presentation is we had a grant this year for mattress recycling, and that's been a tremendous success. What happens is we have a container that's bought at Milford Street. As those mattresses are brought in there, after they reach a certain point, we call the person who the grant is with, and they come pick them up. That's reduced that, and they're actually taken to a plant and recycled. So that's been a great thing. So that's just something I think. So I just feel that and another thing that we've got on the horizon, which is very important, is the relocation of the Milford Street property up there. As everybody knows, with Magnolia going very strong, we're going to have to do that. And I think the important working with Edmund and his team from Parks as our capital projects lead on that makes sure that when we design and build that facility up there, that we've got everything we need. I'm familiar, and I've actually showed the mayor one in Greenville and some other places. There's some great opportunities to do some things to build a fantastic facility, which will help us and everybody that'll be using it, stormwater and everybody else. So that's something I think that we'll continue to work on. So that's our number one priority. Moving to number 2, we have, and there's a request for a garbage cart audit. And ever since the city started supplying cans, and I'm not sure, it's been several years ago, Matt, you can jump in if you want, that we've never really had a good handle on what's out there as far as cans and things. So what we'd like to do is do an audit of our cans, and that would include accounting and also help us to place tags on those cans, which will help us keep track of those cans and know how many cans are at each resident and each business that have cans. So that's something that which we feel is really important to continue good operation of environmental services garbage. And next thing we had in there, the next item on the list is a restoration of cuts to the pavement management money. And that's just a budget cut that we did last year in a tight budget. We would like to see that come back. the next new project is a dumpster on James Island and Daniel Island for our sweepers. And this sounds kind of a strange thing, but what we would do is we would look to have our sweepers down when it gets full. They have to go all the way from either Daniel Island or James Island, all the way back to Milford Street to dump in the drying bed in the yard, then go back online. So there's a lot of time spent in travel because the hoppers on those machines really aren't that big. So they're going back and forth 3 times a day and just traveling to empty. So they're not sweeping. And I'm sure Councilmember Jackson and Councilmember Shea, people out in the suburbs, they want their streets swept too. So this would make us more efficient. What would happen is we would place those dumpsters when we're doing those sweepings in those areas, and a high hopper dumpster would actually come and dump into the container, and therefore they wouldn't have to leave the island or leave West Ashley out of West Ashley, wherever. So we think that's really an innovative thing that can really make us more efficient. So that's something we would really like to see funded. Next, in our fleet operation, we have some wireless mobile column lifts, and these lifts allow us to work on our heavy duty trucks and things. Right now, the way our numbers are, we don't have a set where we can work on more than one at a time. So by buying this additional set, and they're really not that expensive in the scheme of things, it allows us to work on dual axle vehicles, more than one, and hopefully 2 at the time. So we want to use that. Numbers 5 through 10 are really just restoration of last costs. And unless there's any questions on those specifically, you will notice in there's overtime cost. We've worked very hard this year with Andrew and Corey and the team from budget and finance. But it's just, unfortunately, the nature of what we do in public service. There's going to be some overtime. And one thing that's really kind of hurt us, and we've got great assistance from not only HR, but budget in funding positions, but we continue to have trouble filling driver positions and things like that. And I think honestly, one of the main reasons is cost. I mean, if you come down 26 a couple times a day, you'll see signs for truckers, companies asking for CDLs. This is a nationwide problem for people. But if you look, I understand, I'm not sure if it was today or yesterday's paper, but I think Charleston County and North Charleston, they're raising their salaries up for their drivers and stuff. So therefore, it's going to put us in a discrepancy. So with a small pool of drivers to go for, and now we're not paying what's competitive in the area, it's going to really affect us. And we've got good equipment. Council and the mayor, you've funded great equipment over the years for us. The ASLs are tremendous in our outlying areas, and we continue to do good well with that. We using knuckle booms more for our trash, but we just have to do something and figure it out. And I know working with Kay and her team and Amy and their team, I think we're doing everything we can. I think we've reached a point where really it's just a salary thing that we have to think about for those positions. So I just wanted to get that out there for that. Big Billy's.
Tom, I had a relative who runs a restaurant, couldn't find a dishwasher. She advertised for $25 an hour and got no response. So what you're saying is right on point. It's just keeping people employed and enticing them is a number one. I know it's going to be a number one challenge for your department.
And the interesting thing, you're right, is now, I think, unfortunately, last year, some people got used to not working with assistance from the government and everything. And in some positions, like waiters, waitresses, they just hadn't gone back to work. But we need to worry about what we can. And I think, when we interview people, we've been doing some interviews for positions lately. The city is a fantastic employer. I mean, what Amy and her team does, as far as, I think in certain areas, as far as salary and making us competitive, and then what Kay and them do, and the benefits that you as a council approve for the city's a great place to work. And under the leadership of the mayor, I think we've got a lot of great opportunities here. If we can just get some of those salaries in certain positions up to a different level, I think it'll really help us fight what really, like Councilmember Shea said, is a nationwide problem.
Tom, are y'all still using the turning leaf candidates?
Man, I think, don't we have 1 or 2 in streets?
So we currently have a turning leaf on streets and sidewalk or street sweeping right now as a ground custodian, and we do continue to use them when they are available. Yes. So
y'all keeping that line of communication available for any other candidates?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Matt.
Speaking of the big bellies, the big belly trash cans, I think have been a big success throughout the city. We have a lot of requests to have those at other places, and we're asking for some additional money to buy some more this year. The next item is really is a really tough item. The crosstown planters. Everybody's traveled across town. It's amazing to me the number of people that hit those planters. I mean, with the curb and everything there, the damage is done. But we've kind of started a process and one of the reasons they're so expensive to repair is DOT makes the repair happen at night is to not cause traffic gridlock. But one thing that we've kind of talked about in-house and getting some great help from Julia and Copeland, the legal team, is if somebody hits those things, we're going to try and go after them, for the damage to city property. So we're working with our police department, our legal department to go back and see if we can create records and find records of accidents where they've actually hit those and go after some monies from the people that caused that damage. But that's something that really needs to be done. That's kind of our internal gateway to the city, and it really needs to be done. And the mayor's also talked to Jason and I about, I think, some additional plannings once we get those things prepared. So we want to continue to work on that. Moving on through, again, a lot of our other stuff is just restoring cuts from last year. Trying to see if there's any really big ones that come out, but again, there are a lot of small line items which we made cuts and different things, such as uniforms and protective clothing, where we cut and just want to be able to restore those, and printing services and things like that, and office supplies. So that's really kind of the overall budget request for us. And I'm going to go ahead and answer Councilmember Shade's question. What we're requesting is it's a 6% increase over the 2020 budget and about a 5.2% over the 2021 budget. So I've always tried to be a good steward of the city's money, leading this department and doing that, but we still have to provide our services, our basic services, what we're here for. So I'd be glad to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions? Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, Tom, I thank you for all this level of detail. I honestly never think about, the multiple divisions that you have under public service. So it's really great to be reminded. Do you have an organization chart that you might be able to send us?
Yes, ma'am. I'll be glad to send that to you.
That would be great. And then I just wanted to encourage you. I own a significant piece of guardrail up in Northern Virginia. And I think that would be, the idea of people need to pay for what they break. I mean, I think that's a really great idea. I hope the state doesn't, have some sort of preemptive, legislation that means we can't do that, because it's the right thing for everybody. So
yes, ma'am. I talked with Julia about that recently, and we're going to really pursue that and go back where researching police reports and things of that nature. There's one other thing I did want to mention when Councilman Jackson reminded me. We last year made an attempt with the PSD on James Island to kind of share services, as Robert said in his presentation. We've got a lot of, they used to call them donut holes, but we got mixed city, county, things like that. And the city stepped up, and we were really ready to push to doing a pilot program with the PSD, and we're still working on that. Matt's working with his cohort over there to make that happen, and that's just something which I think will be a better service if we've got one house on one street and they've got 7 and reverse the same somewhere else to do that. And I also want to let you know that we're also looking that Charleston County is trying to put an intergovernmental agreement between us and the town of James Island. And so we're looking at some things to do where we can share services for our citizens and be more effective instead of running down one street to pick up a garbage can when they pick up the rest of them. So we're working very hard on those, and we'll bring those proposals to Public Works in the next few months.
That's great. I mean, I think we did everything we possibly could with the former leadership of the PSD. So I'm really glad that, we're building relationships. And so I've just, the mayor and I have agreed that it's better for, the elected officials to get out of the way and let you all, become better friends, honestly, in the way that you can help each other out. And I know that that's been the goal that Matt Altop has led, ever since I've been in
Absolutely.
my seat. And so, yeah, just let us know when it's time
Yeah,
to,
one thing
you
we
know,
did,
take action.
everybody may not remember, is they had a fire over there and they lost some of their vehicles in the
Right.
city under the mayor and the council. We graciously donated some things that we get ready to deadline. So I think the city, we want to be a good friend and neighbor and partner and continue to do those type things. So we're going to really work hard because I think this has a lot of benefit.
I have to say that as I drive around James Island, it is totally a checkerboard of, you know, brown cans and green cans. And so whenever I see a lid on a can that's been picked up, that's shut tight, I take a photo of it. So I'll send you my collection one of these days. Because that's just
great.
that's a false, you know, accusation
Yes,
that we
ma'am.
were, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Councilmember Shade?
So Tom, you guys are like our ambassadors to our community, and we don't hear from them unless they got a complaint. And one of the things that we were battling last year was this holiday schedule and when trash was being picked up and not being picked up. I saw $500 for advertising. Is there any other tools that you think that you need to get word out to the community about the schedule? Because two things we hear complaints about. You're off schedule and my trash can's broken. And so one of the things that would save us a lot of headache is anything we can do to make that job easier for you and Matt as to changing the schedule and communicating that to our constituents.
We're working, one thing we're working on in the process of those ordinance changes, a big thing that you and other council members on the committee asked is an education process, and we're working on that. Flyers and stickers and things like that, and public service announcements. One thing also which we did is a little bit interesting, I think, is we purchased a video camera, and the interesting thing with the video camera is that we're going to make some public service announcements, and we're going to work with our public information officer, with Jack and his staff, where we can create some little 2-minute videos that we can post online to answer some questions and have that. And we'll be looking to use the mayor and some other people to make these really short videos and see what we can do, so we can continue to work from that.
I do have one more thing that we're looking at that will be in the IT budget. It's called Rec Collect. Tracy, myself, Robert, Hawk have been looking into. It goes along with our Routeware system. It's a calendar / information tool that will have push notifications, text messaging, and all these other features that will be able to send out messages to individuals. And we can, if we're running behind in a section of town, we can just send it to them instead of sending it to everybody. We can pick and choose who that message gets sent out to. They would have to subscribe, but they do help us with that educational piece, get the residents to sign up for that system. But that is something that will be coming across in the IT budget for this year, and I think will be a huge benefit to our getting the word out and different things. And we'll have a calendar on there as well.
Sounds good, Matt. Thanks for the update.
Anybody else? So Tom, Matt, let me ask a question if I may. The garbage cart audit, just curious, do we hire an employee to do that, or is there some company that comes in and does that, kind of like a SWAT team? How does that work?
Matt,
So it'll be done via temps. We'll hire a few temps to come in, and they'll follow garbage trucks. That way we know all the carts are out, and they'll do a route a day, and go down there, and they'll record serial numbers and addresses. So that way we know how many carts are at each address, and then we can help with our route planning a little better. They'll also be able to know, right, if they've got more carts than they're supposed to have, and different things like that. It'll be entered into our Routeware system where they can be tracked. So if down the road, when we get to the RFID scanners, if we pick up a cart and it's not at the correct address, it will flag us. So that way we know that cart belongs somewhere else.
Gotcha. I think long-term, that's a really important thing for us to get done.
Yes,
So we can kind of move to the next level or two of technology to help us with all of this. So anyway, I was just curious how that worked. On sidewalks, did y'all basically lead the budget same as last year on sidewalk repairs, kind of the general budget?
Matt, we did increase that. I think part of that was a replacement for costs last year that we were
Yeah,
cut. Is that correct?
it was number 3, the restoration of the pavement management, because that was cut from 200 to 100,000 this year. So we're asking for that extra 100,000 back.
Oh, good. It said pavement, so that, I guess, wasn't clear to me. That's our sidewalks budget.
That's our sidewalks division, yes.
And Mayor, I don't want to put Matt on the spot, and Matt, I apologize if you don't remember, but we just finished using our sidewalk grinding contract, and we concentrated south of Broad. But Matt, do you kind of remember roughly what we talked about, how we saved using that and as far as replacing panels?
So yeah, we did everything south of Broad with some of the extra money that was placed in that fund for this year to make up for the 100,000 that was cut. We spent $115,000 on everything south of Broad that had concrete sidewalks. And working with that company, we figured it would cost us to repair or replace all those panels about $1.7 million.
Wow. Thank you so much. All right. Any other questions for Tom or Matt? Councilmember Shade?
You brought that sidewalk question up, Mayor, so I can't let that go. Don't we get reimbursed by the state, don't we, for those sidewalk repairs? Don't we get a kick in of money for, we take over the responsibility for the sidewalk. I mean, I've been complaining about this since day one I've been on council, that the sidewalks are now our responsibility. I thought we got paid for that by the state. No, we don't get anything from that?
Not that I know of.
No, we don't get anything, Councilmember Shade, for that.
That's why they want to give us the responsibility.
That's why they want to give it to us. I mean, it's just this
It's
revolving
staying on the road.
door, except it revolves just one direction, not back around. And this is sort of what we were talking about last night at the Revitalization Commission meeting, with things along these lines. And some of them were signage that we spent a good bit of time chatting about. But these damn sidewalks, we get stuck with this bill of over $1 million. And I mean, I can give you probably $500,000 of repairs just off of Old Town Road that need to be addressed. And that's all on state highway. That's all state road that we're responsible for. Anyhow, that you know my position about that, how I complain about that all the time. But there's going to be another way of getting some kind of refund. And I know Councilman Ware is going to jump in real quick, but part of that is whether or not we can tap into that pool we discussed last night from the governor's office on that stimulus money. Anyhow.
Okay, Councilman Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't agree with you more, Councilman Shade. It's a sore subject, and you're so right to keep hitting that to get some solution out of the state one day. But Mr. Brown, I wanted to compliment you for the professionalism that you certainly have brought to this department, and your leadership that you brought. I appreciate the way you laid everything out. You and your team, and Mr. Althoff and others, are really up the level to the tune where private sector have to match your service. And sometimes people think the contractors on the outside are obviously better. They're not better than our department. So thank you for what you do. But my question is really to Ms. Wharton. I think we're going to find a theme where our people are underpaid. Obviously, it's the case in public works. I think we're going to find that in other departments as we work through this budget. And just as Mr. O'Brien said, North Charleston is doing some things with their drivers, private sector doing things with their drivers. How in the world do we put a priority on upgrading our people's pay? And I just mean, I think we're going to see this as a theme, Mr. Mayor, throughout city government, right? I spoke to Mr. Fountain. I know he's not here, but and trying to get ditches clean. And he just told me almost out of frustration. We all know how calm and cool Matt Fountain is. I mean, his pulse doesn't rise that much. He said, you just can't find people for $13 an hour, $14 an hour to go and clean ditches and dig ditches and chop vines and things like that. And he's right about it. So how do we put, and maybe this is not the answer, I'm not looking for an answer today, but Ms. Wharton, but certainly if we were to come through it, because if North Charleston does something right now that we think we can't afford, we're gonna lose people, okay? And if we don't have the people to do the public works, to do the planning, to do, to keep our firemen across the board, we're gonna be, we're not going to be clicking on all cylinders. And we've gone through 19 and tail end of 19 and certainly 20 and now 21 fledgling. If we were to put a strategy in place to say, hey, instead of being reactive to what the county does with pay with truck drivers, or being reactive what the city of North Charleston or Mount Pleasant may do with their folk, how would we do that? In other words, obviously, if we had the money, we'd get everybody a 10% pay raise. I'd vote for that right now. We don't have the money. But if there's some sources that if we knew we had to do pay raises, in particular for retention, what are some of the things we have to cut out doing and make that a priority, I guess, if we're going to do that in this budget? Because our department heads are coming here with some very good requests. They're not out of line, but we all know we're dealing with diminishing resources. But I don't know if we've ever looked at it from the standpoint of let's take care of our people first, and from the sources we can, and then and go from there. So Ms. Wharton, if we were to put priority on raising the pay to the point to where we can just be competitive, where North Charleston and the county is not paying more than us, how could we do that?
So Councilmember Waring, what we'd have to do is all of our fact of life increases that we have no control over, those obviously go into the budget first, and then we'd have to make that the next priority. And every other request that comes through, that we look at that after we do some kind of pay plan. That would have to be our very next, other than the life safety things that we need to do as well. But that's what we would have to do. And just going back to a few years ago when we did the pay plan adjustment, we were kind of at this point, if you remember, and we came and said, we have to do this. Like, we have to do this for everybody. Because what happens is exactly what Tom is talking about. What we end up doing is, okay, we have one group of people, we're losing a lot of people. So we look at those salaries and we try to make adjustments and make it work. And then all of a sudden stormwater now is having all kinds of problems. So we're constantly jumping here and there trying to fix something when you just need to fix it across the board. So that's what we want to do for 2022, but it will come with a big price tag and everybody has to be committed to it. And that's the only way that we will be able to do it.
How long does it take to figure out that price tag?
And Councilmember Jackson can probably speak to this too from the HR committee. We had several different recommendations come through the HR committee because our attrition rate is terrible. Not sworn. Sworn is doing okay. It's non-sworn. We're losing people badly in pretty much every single department, and then we can't hire people. So we can bring to ad hoc to you when we have our next meeting, the attrition rates and everything, so you can kind of see what we're talking about. But the recommendation coming forward to ad hoc will be, if it's okay, Councilmember Jackson and Mayor, for me to say this now, is an increase in minimum wage over the next 3 years, which will also push through an increase for all of our employees because you have that compression issue. So you would have to change the whole entire pay plan in order to make this work. So that's what we plan to bring forth to the ad hoc committee once we get past these departmental discussions.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to maybe piggyback on what Councilman Waring just mentioned, which I thought was a extremely important point that we need to be grappling with, is I think part of the answer to the question is we as a council need to stop having panic attacks when we start talking about, 2 mil, 3 mil tax increases. I mean, I made the comment the other day about the parks bond. I mean, we've got a champagne taste and a beer budget. We have an extremely large, geographic, sprawling city. We have constituents that rightly demand a certain level of service, be it public works, be it stormwater, what have you. We need to staff these positions. I mean, the money's got to come from somewhere. We're limited into what we're allowed to, do fiscally under state law. We got to start looking at, the revenue side of things. And I'm open to all solutions where we can have them. But, as a council, we've got to put our big boy pants and big girl pants and skirts or whatever you want to wear when we're having some of these conversations, and not just getting these very, I don't even know what to call it, but we've all seen it. We just need to start kind of manning up a little bit on some of these issues and paying our folks what they deserve and keeping the city staffed. I mean, it's very easy to talk about how much we appreciate our folks, but we need to start putting our money where our mouth is. And again, we're talking $20, $30, $40, $50 a year for most people. I mean, it's not that serious, and the amount of benefit we could get from that, I think, would be really, really transformative. So just something to think about.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that thought. And again, as Amy said, we'll take on this issue directly after we get past the departments. And Councilmember Appel makes a good point, because there's sometimes this mentality that, oh, there's all this fat out there that if we just cut all this fat, we could, increase salaries a little bit. And Amy runs a pretty tight ship, y'all. And we've, as we looked at the potential budget cuts over the last year or so, we all saw that. So, sometimes to do what you feel like you got to do, we're going to have to look at the revenue side, no question about it. All right. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Matt. Keep up the good work and good presentation. Next up is Parks Department, Mr. Jason Kronsberg.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've got a couple different screens here, so I'm going to be looking at different screens as we go through. So first, I just wanted to say something that is a reoccurring theme that you're all hearing, that you just finished talking about. While we haven't requested any new staffing positions, we have a number of positions that either remain open and advertised or are frozen. So we anticipate over the coming months maybe to request some of the frozen positions, but there's no need to request those positions when we have open positions, some for up to 24 months. Right now we have 3 forestry positions open, 3 grounds crew positions open, a hort position, a painter, an assistant tradesmaster, a plumber, and after 2 years, we just hired our second HVAC technician, and he lasted about 2 weeks. He resigned. So we're back to 1 HVAC tech. And again, some of these positions have been open for up to 2 years with very few qualified applicants applying for them. So it's definitely a challenge for us to keep doing the work that we do. We just opened up 3 very large facilities this year, and we're still down all of those positions. So it does affect us considerably when we try to do our daily work and keep our facilities and parks up to the par that everyone expects. So with that being said, I'll move on to the department requests, and I'll share the requests for you. I'm sure you've already seen them, but I can talk from them. Hopefully the right screen came up. Is you seeing my list?
Yes.
Okay. So for this year, first and foremost is to get back our overtime numbers. When it rains, we have to use the weekends to catch up, especially for grounds maintenance and athletic fields. We plant trees every year, we like to water trees on the weekend. We've gotten a little bit more efficient with that, but we don't like to take our regular maintenance day from the work week to water trees. There's so many things there. When we do a farmer's market during the week, that takes a crew out of rotation almost the entire day to go set the farmer's market up and then break it down. And it's a very long day. And all of that affects our overtime. Trash in the parks, tree maintenance, all of it. So that's one of our biggest priorities, is to get that overtime back, which it really does supplement our staffing levels. And so we use those weekends to catch up on a lot of stuff. And I won't go through every single line item. Happy to answer any questions, but I'm going to keep going through. We have some equipment needs. That's the second line, is a mini excavator. When we need things, either we have to borrow from other departments or rent, and that takes a couple days to get the equipment here and then back, and it just affects our efficiency when we're trying to keep up with the workload. Again, a lot of these are kind of refilling the fund from our COVID reductions, tree pruning, contract arborist services, palmetto pruning. So we have 5 people on our forestry crew right now that goes from Daniel Island across all of our boroughs through the peninsula, West Ashley, Johns, and James Island. So with 5 to 6 guys, we have about a 6-month backlog in tree requests. There's certain expectations that people see over the past couple of years. We've with the help of BFRC and yourselves, we've been able to fund a lot more contract pruning, especially for palmetto trees around the city. There's no way for us to do it all. So we have been relying on a lot of these contract services around the city to get the work done. And we're starting to hear a lot of complaints this year that the areas that we've been pruning via contract over the past couple of years, well, the stuff's not getting done this year. And we continue to say that we're in a tough budget year, and you're just going to have to be patient with us until our budgets get reestablished. And I also say that and you've heard this from other departments as well, with the multiple divisions, we serve all of our internal clients, whether it's police department, fire department, recreation, across the departments. It's hard to really prioritize some of these things over the others, especially when you get like this next one. We have an HVAC system we need to replace at the police department in their IT server room. So that's a $65,000 replacement. The next one you see, which I changed today, which is different than your current pack, is some unforeseen conditions we found at the ballpark when we were doing our electrical service repair. The entire electrical feed coming into that building was below grade, and the conduits have separated, and there's a chance that the whole system could get shorted out if those conduits shift anymore. So that whole system, the main feeds to that facility need to come out. Those sleeves need to be reinstalled and new wires run. We really need to get that done this year while the contractor's on site, and can get it done while they're there. Some items like the Moultrie Park restroom, there's a leak underneath the slab. We have to excavate the slab and get that fixed. It's a pretty major project that there's not a lot of return on it, but it needs to happen. A lot of these things you can't see either. So, they're big ticket items, but they're things that need to happen. Ag supplies budgets, this is how we fertilize our fields. This is how we put out the ant bait, which takes the fire ants out of our athletic fields and protects the children. Line item number 8, this is Fire Station 19 and Fire Station 18 renovations. So again, you can see the breadth in which these line items cross across the city. We have Herbert Hazel Pool exterior repair needs at $50,000, construction materials and supplies restoration. And then we have a citywide street tree inventory need. So we don't know what we have out there, and we need a better way to track the work that we do. And we need a better way to track the areas that need tree planting. We plant a lot of trees every year, whether it's a private development, in the newer parts of the city, or it's the 100 or so trees that we plant with our own staff. But we need an inventory to know what we have, know the condition of what we have, and it'll help us budget and prioritize the work to come. Irrigation controllers, this is part of our original Johnson Controls energy performance contract. We have some old outdated equipment out there that needs to be repaired and that are being operated manually right now. And then some of these things that you see coming up here in Hampstead Square, for the past couple of years, we've been trying to do some landscape enhancements in Hampstead Square. Those budgets got cut due to COVID, and we did recently get a AARP neighborhood grant. So we're working to find matches to that. There was no match required for that, but we're getting ready to start some work in Hampstead Square. But there's a lot of work that still needs to happen in Hampstead Square, and we need the funding to upfit those old park spaces. And a lot of them were identified in the Parks and Rec plan that you all saw. There's a whole planter along Meeting Street at Marion Square that we prepped for irrigation work about a year and a half ago prior to COVID, but 2 years ago. And we didn't have the money to get the plants back in there. Washington Park sod replacement by City Hall. This is an area that it sees millions of visitors a year, and it's a tough place to grow grass. But we've figured out every 4 or 5 years we need to go in and just redo all the grass. It's something that we have to do if we want to make our park spaces shine like they should. Again, Rag Square landscape renovation. This is an area that we work on with the Charleston Parks Conservancy. We've done little bits and pieces over the years. We've done the front steps many years ago. We did the first third of the park with the Charleston Parks Conservancy. Now we have 2/3 of the park that remains to get pathway refurbishments, irrigation upfits, and sod and landscaping. Here's a request that came from the neighborhood in Ferguson Village. They want us to beautify their park space. So this is to plant and irrigate annual and perennial plantings along the ball field. It gives that streetscape and that curb appeal. We've never had a line item for annual plant replacements. That's line item number 18. So in a lot of our parks, the only thing constant about landscape certainly is change. So we don't have a budget that we use to buy plants from. We grow a lot of plants in our greenhouse, but we've never had anything that we could go and replace plants that have died. So for instance, down at Gadsdenboro and Liberty Square, the past 2 or 3 hurricanes that have covered up those landscapes with salt water, even at Waterfront Park, the trees are in decline. It takes a couple of years for that salt water to take effect, but you lose plants, you lose trees, they're not covered by FEMA. And we need line items to replant those things. Equipment leases, grounds, facility. Going back to one of the items above, we need the equipment to do the job. We've gotten a lot of great equipment over the past couple of years, but we still need more. Low Country Senior Center, with the opening of Waring Senior Center, the existing Low Country Senior Center, it's outdated, and they're requesting that city-owned facility get some upgrades. There's some cabinetry that needs to be replaced. There's a request for flooring and new lighting and painting, and these are things that we don't have in our current maintenance budgets. Horticultural specialized supplies, our annual seat replacement for the ballpark. Every year we've been taking this $35,000 and replacing as many seats as we can in chunks. So if you go out there, you'll see the seats that are very faded. You can't see the numbers and they get brittle. So it's just another thing that we try to do every year. Of course, as you all know, we own the facility. There's another request that the ballpark dugout mats get replaced. Again, some more OT restoration in facilities and electrical. We got a roof at Hazel Parker Playground that needs to be replaced. That's been on our list for a couple of years. It's not currently leaking, but we need to get it replaced before they fail. Tennis and basketball courts resurfacing. Over the years, we've increased that budget considerably, and we've been demolishing and reconstructing at least one court a year, as well as repainting courts. We need a lot more, but that's all identified in the Parks and Rec master plan. But these are the baby steps that we've been able to achieve over the past couple of years. And then, of course, having to balance the budget, some of these things got cut. So again, some more overtime, back to, the Gadsdenboro Park plant replacements, Lake Dodder, stocking the grass carp to help control the duckweed that grows in there, and then the Liberty Square landscape renovation. So a lot of talking, happy to answer any questions. Again, back to the Parks and Rec plan. This is not even a dent in what our needs are, but these are some of the immediate needs that we need to kind of address and to keep moving forward to make places better, which has kind of been my career since I got out of college as a landscape architect, is to always leave something better than I found it. So happy to answer any questions or any specifics that you may have.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mayor. Jason, we've had this discussion before and appreciate what you've been able to do with your budget and the personnel that you have. What do you need personnel wise immediately?
Immediately, I need all the positions filled that we have open, but that's hard. I've got a whole forestry crew that's open. I've got 3 groundskeepers. I got tradesmasters, plumbers, painters. I mean, you name it. We've got it open, and most of them have been open for a long time.
So, what does that mean number wise? I mean, is that 20 people, 25 people? And what does that mean budget wise as well? I mean,
well, right now the positions that are open are budgeted. Okay. We just can't fill them.
So does that go back to the problem we we're just talking about with pay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hardly, mostly.
So I mean that's your main obstacle is you got the money set aside for those positions. You just can't recruit people to come in and fill them.
That's right.
That's right. So help us solicit some employees. Councilmember Jackson.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot, Jason. I really appreciate the way that you think about things. And, I've had a shadow of a job like you do. I'm sure it wakes you up in the night worrying about who's going to put the paint on the peeling, walls. So you have my empathy as much as I can deliver it. I also, I think in your part-time job, you could be the sort of budget psychologist for the rest of your colleagues around the city, because it's tough to have to think in all these levels of, work and work plans and details, and you do it, I think very graciously to the rest of us who are just sort of saying, well, what do you need $15,000 for? That shouldn't matter. So I empathize with you. Yeah, so and we want to keep it that way.
Yeah, and Amy's helped with her team.
So my memory question is: it seemed like the last 3+ years that I've been looking at the budget with some responsibility that you had put forward, and maybe this comes under admin, so maybe I'm just asking at the wrong time, but there was a big number on the budget that I am thinking about that was just to literally inventory and survey all of our building, like preventive, restoration, maintenance, the bigger ticket items. I know Councilmember Seekins used to say, we don't want to pay for that because we'd have a heart attack when we get the results. But isn't that kind of, reporting, doesn't that need to be part of what we are responsible to do?
Yes, and we've been talking about that for a couple of years with Amy and everyone else in the parks and facilities and capital projects. It just like the Parks and Rec plan, a facilities assessment is going to show us what our immediate needs are. There's going to be sticker shock, but it'll give us a roadmap forward and not just kind of the whack-a-mole or the most urgent roof leak. Again, sticker shock, yes, but it gives us a roadmap for the way forward on budgeting and capital funding. So it is something that we've talked about over the years. So yes.
Are there any foundations or anything now that would be, eligible to make some sort of grant for part of that kind of effort? I mean, back in the day, the National Trust had those sorts of resources, and they're a shadow of what they used to be able to budget when they were supported by the federal government at some high level percentage. But surely there's like some foundations that would really want us to know what we're looking at.
Not that I'm aware of, that
Really?
when we get into the day-to-day work and we're playing the whack-a-mole, it's not a lot of time
Right.
to really search out things like that. And
Right.
not a lot of free time, if you will.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can get the Preservation Society or somebody to help, think about that. I mean, they would also be shocked if we were, taking risks with our precious real estate assets. So
I think that the biggest need probably, and I think Amy and Chief Curia, if he's on here, is really getting our public safety facilities up to, in some cases, a livable condition. That's been our focus, especially through the pandemic, is to really focus on our public safety facilities. And we have a lot of those on the list that they're funded and we're making headway, but it certainly is a priority.
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I would encourage you to just keep putting that in front of us.
So in effect, we have been doing that kind of assessment on the fire stations, but not necessarily our other buildings and facilities. Is that right, Jason? And did you include anything in this year's budget to do such an assessment?
No, we didn't. What we have been doing with the help of Chief Curia is we have a specific project manager assigned to the fire department now. So he works with the fire department leadership, and we come up with them on the prioritization plan for the next station need from a capital maintenance point of view. New stations are on the capital plan, but from a maintenance point of view, that's what you see a lot of in these lists. So we're making good headway. We have some good projects that are happening with some of our historic stations downtown. We know that there's some pretty immediate needs for Fire Station 2 and 3. These facilities are over 100 years old, but not only those historic facilities, but it's the small ranch house that was converted into a fire station somewhere in the city. These are the things that it's the quality of life things for the teams that work out of those facilities.
Can I just add something? Can I just add something to that, Jason? Because we had talked for 2 years about a whole citywide building facilities study. And we had talked about if we were able to fund that, we would focus on fire stations first. So Jason did not put that in his budget this year, but we can talk about that in ad hoc again, in terms of how we might be able to fund that this year. But there's been no formal review of the fire stations or any of our buildings at all. We're just kind of picking, which stations we think need to have the most work done to them and doing it that way. But there's not been a formal study, let's say, or review of the facilities themselves.
Right. And I see Edmund Mo's picture popped up on the screen. Edmund?
I did want to add, though, that for the parking garages, we did do an assessment of those, and we consider that as part of our inventory. And Councilwoman Jackson, I think you might have been on that selection committee. But,
Yes.
we have, I actually have a proposal on my desk right now to do the repairs necessary for those facilities, and BFRC has budgeted for that. It's just had to get into the pipeline of all the other projects that they're working on right now. But that's 12 facilities, I believe, 12 parking garages that we'll be working on. So that is part of the inventory.
Yeah, that's good to be reminded. I was really thinking more about our actual buildings that I know, had been on the list. So, but it's good to be reminded parking garages are going to be well done.
So maybe we think about this, take a bite of the elephant at a time, and we did an assessment on the garages. We kind of, through this process, been looking at the fire stations. Let's maybe not put in the budget the money to do everything, in 1 year, but pick out the rest of the public safety facilities and do them next. And then the next year, do the park houses, and the year after, take it a step at a time, and at least we'll start to catch up a little bit. Anyway, there's a thought for you. Councilmember Shade?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Chief Courier was on a few moments ago. He and I have just been discussing that particular issue that Eamon has brought up. I'm sorry, what Jason has brought up. And I've asked him if he could to try to work out a schedule on either Friday morning or Friday afternoon that we could start taking tours of the facilities that he's identified that need immediate attention. In particular, give us an update on some of the facilities that are being renovated, like the Cannon Street facility, and what's going on the Hugie Street facility station. And then several years ago, I took a tour of all the ones out on Daniel Island and some of the ones in West Ashley. So I think it would be helpful to council and any other staff member to do a walkthrough to see these facilities and the conditions that they're in, and then do a more formal professional assessment and inventory. But sometimes when you have the visual, you'll have a better idea of what we're looking at with these things. And to your point, Mayor, we don't need to, this is an elephant. We take one bite at a time with it. But maybe it will give us sort of an idea of how we want to start tackling this, because this is a huge problem for public safety issues dealing with these fire stations, the livability conditions that some of these men and women live in our response time. So we've covered. We're doing an excellent job with the fire department and what we've got available to us. But on the other hand, we've just got to start looking at this from a long-term solution. As you said, Mayor, we're not going to resolve it in one budget year, but hopefully this tour that the chief is setting up, we can give us a visual aid on that.
Gotcha.
Anything that you wanted to add to that, Chief? Did I leave anything out?
No, sir. I think you've got it covered. I sent a memo to all members of council and to the mayor. It's been a couple of weeks ago now, just given the high level as far as where we are with the fire department facilities. And I do have to say, Amy is a good partner with us. Jason's a good partner with us, and Edmund's a good partner. I don't really think with those three that the case has to be made that massive amounts of work have to be done. But I also realize we're not the only ones with needs. So if we want to focus on the fire facilities first and then move off to the rest of public safety, or however the city wants to plan it out, I do think it's appropriate, and I appreciate the conversation.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Jackson?
Yeah, it just occurred to me as you were talking, Mayor, and then everybody else, that maybe a good way to take, more of an incremental tactic would be to start with the vulnerability assessment and see, physically what our physical assets are that would be in the priority details of that report.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it got down to that in the weeds to that level, but maybe it did. We can go back and check that. Okay, I did have two questions myself. Speaking of grants, Jason, I could certainly understand it's difficult to find a grant for buildings assessment, but the one thing you got on here that, what about that tree inventory? Is that something that maybe the Arbor, foundation or some group like that would help us with? I mean, it might be worth doing a Google search or getting Sarah to take a look at for us.
Yeah, we can certainly investigate that. Good idea.
Yeah. And then my other question is probably more of an Amy question, and I know, Amy, you can report things various ways by your codes and all. And when I see that the total budget here at the bottom line is a 12.07 increase over last year, but it includes what I would call capital projects kind of expenses, like the electrical service or the fire station renovation or the Low Country Senior Center renovation and the Hazel Parker roof, things like that, seem to be outside of the regular operating budget of the Parks Department. Do you, in terms of looking at the departmental change increase from one year to the next, can you do that without having those kinds of items in there?
So Mayor, those are projects that are actually budgeted in the general fund. They're not in the capital projects division, so that's why they're included in the number.
Right. Well,
Often we move them out. If we can find different funding sources for them, we would move them out of there.
well, maybe just when you report it, you can say, well, the park's operating budget is this, and it's gone up 3%. And for year to year, you have, like you say, maintenance or kind of mini capital projects that are funded through the general fund. It just seems like it skews the numbers from one year to the next, it would seem to me, based on how much of that we're requesting and putting into the Parks Department budget. But
yes. We have larger projects like that in last year's budget too, but we can separate it out to show like this is operating, and of that amount, these are smaller capital projects, so you can see the different numbers. That's not a problem.
it'd be, if it's not too hard, I mean, somebody could say, well, gee, parks went up 12% and, some other department only went up 3%, but it's, you get my point. It's not because of a bunch of operational costs. It's just because we're fixing a fire station. But anyway.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that was sort of my point too, in asking about Robert's one-time, big numbers that, I mean, I certainly am nobody to question, how we designate things, but when I was doing housing work, we would always, and it would be these same sorts of things. They're not big enough to be capital projects or whatever, but they were one-time costs, and it would be within the general fund, but then designated for a specific purpose so that it wouldn't flow up into the year to year to year changes of just the operating numbers. So I think that's what you were trying to get at, Mayor. And so was I.
And I understand what you're saying. However, we have these projects every year, so they're in there every single year. It's just different things, different fire stations that we're fixing up or other buildings that we're doing renovations in. So those numbers really are in their budget every year. They're just for different projects. So yeah, it's a one-time cost for this fire station this year, and it's a one-time cost for the next year and for a different station. But the numbers are still in their budget. But we can separate them out. That's fine. But it's still an increase in their general fund operating budget. So, but we can take it. We can play with it and show you.
Yeah.
What it would look like.
That'd be great. Councilmember Appel, you're awfully quiet there. You got anything for us? Or Councilmember Waring?
I got nothing, but it's tempting. I'm going to try and see if I can just lay low. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm agreeing with everything that's being said. So.
Okay, good.
Great report.
Well, thank you, Jason and Edmund. Appreciate all your fine work and efforts. You've got a lot on your plates, and we appreciate it. So,
thank you for your support.
What's that?
I just said thank you for your support, and it's a big team, but we're all here to help. So,
yes, sir. Thank you. All right. So back to Amy to give us an update on our stimulus funds request.
I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay. Can you all see this okay? Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I lose all of, for some reason. Okay, so it's just our update for stimulus funds. We had a few changes from our last meeting, just based on conversations we had with the mayor, mayor's office, really. So we had presented to you a 3% bonus to all our city employees. And after our meeting, the mayor asked us to revisit and scale this to offer our lowest paid employees a higher amount. So we went through different alternatives and came up with a structure where our lowest paid employees would receive a 4.5% bonus and our highest paid would receive a 2.5% bonus. So it kind of scales down by pay grade. If that makes sense. And I have it to show you what it will look like. And then this is obviously in the lieu of the COLA that we could not fund in 2021 due to our projected revenue losses. But with that structure, it's an additional cost of $425,000 over what we reported to you last meeting. So this is what it would look like. So the purple column here is when we said 3% bonus for everybody, because that's probably what we would have given as a COLA. And that's what it would look like, average bonus for each of the pay grades. And we took out fire department sworn and police sworn to show you so we've just had non-sworn versus sworn. And then the new structure of the 2.5% to 4.5% for each pay grade and what that looks like. Can you all see it okay? I tried to make it as big as I could.
So as y'all can see, that equalizes things a little bit and, gives a little better bump to those who are in our lower paid positions. And with all the discussion we've had about those positions in particular, I thought this would be a fair approach under the circumstances and still have a nice bonus for those who are, higher income in the city staff. And I wanted to run it by you before we brought it to Ways and Means. But anyway, what do y'all think? Councilmember Shade and Waring?
I think this is a good start, honestly. I mean, these are the hard numbers. Amy, is there like we did a millage increase, I think $1 million for each mill. Is there a certain formula that on a percentage increase equals X number more dollars? That makes sense what I'm asking?
So a value of a mill is about $1.6 million. So
Right.
to cover this cost, it would be about 2 mills.
All right.
If that makes sense, but we're using the ARPA funds to do this bonus structure. So
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So in other words, when you got in the purple column, a 3% average bonus, and you had this number broken down to total cost, if you, does each percentage point represent a certain dollar amount that, in other words, if we went from 3% to 4% to 5%, how would that break down in the overall cost?
I don't know if I know what you mean. So if we did, so are you saying a straight 4% bonus instead of a straight 3% bonus for everybody?
Yes.
Oh.
If you went up every percentage point, what would that really entail?
It would probably be $1 million, around another $1 million for 1%.
Okay.
For each
Okay.
additional percent. Kathy, is
I'm
that
just trying
right? Or Andrew, it's usually about $1 million per 1%, correct?
Amy, based on the numbers here, it
Yeah.
roundish, it comes out to about $1 million per percent.
Yeah, usually that's how we budget.
Well, that just gives us a good sort of ballpark idea of what we're looking at. And I see what the mayor is doing. And the reason for asking that question, and I follow the logic in going to the lower paid folks getting a 4.5% increase. And I'm just wondering how much we can play with the 2.5% to bring that up to 3% or even 3.5%. I'm not asking you to make that projection now, but I just think that the more that we can contribute towards this increase, the more we're staying even at minimum, even with what we need to be doing for our employees. Does this also include our department heads?
Yes, so that's the unclassified pay
Okay.
grade is department heads. And obviously they would be get the least.
And Councilmember Shade has shown here, this is 425,000 more than
Right.
what we had presented to y'all at the last meeting.
Right, right.
Councilmember Waring?
Thank you, thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I see what you're doing, Mr. Mayor. I'm not necessarily disagree with it, but I just start thinking about out in the world of out in the hinterland of 1,700 to 1,800 employees. I just kind of like the 3% across the board, not because it costs less, but I mean, it could be the same amount, but I like the 3% across the board because it doesn't matter what employee speaks to the other. They say, how much of a bonus did you get? And say, well, I got 4.19%. And say, what did you get? I got 2.65%. I don't know whether that helps morale. I kind of, obviously the person getting the larger amount feels better, of course, but in this case, we're doing a bonus. We're not doing what they all deserve. I know we all would do more if we could, but I think, being even-handed across the board. What did you get? I got 3%. I got 3% too. I got 3% also. The hard work is going to be done with that Councilman Appel made mention to about putting on the big boy pants and looking at the millage increase, because the bonus obviously doesn't repeat itself. What we talked about doing earlier was obviously looking at these pay scales, in its entirety to try keep our people competitive and hopefully slow, I know that we eliminate, but slow the turnover rate. And certainly instead of being reactive to what other municipalities and government bodies do, maybe they get to the point where they're matching us as opposed to us trailing them. And that's where the hard work's going to come in this budget on whatever millage effect on millages to be able to generate the revenue to do that. This one-time bonus, I hope we do the hard work on in being able to pay our people competitively. Doesn't matter which department in the 22 budget, but I just think we should be even-handed and saying, hey, everybody got a 3% pay raise instead of pulling out a calculator, figuring out, I got 3.19%, you got 3%, whatever.
Yeah, I hear you, Councilmember Waring. But I honestly believe when people get that paycheck, they're not thinking about, did I get 2.8%? They're gonna think about that $2,400 or that $1,300 if you're in the lowest grade. And that, when I saw the distribution and the two lowest grades didn't even get to $1,000, I just felt like that it needed to be distributed a little differently, I feel like this is more fair, honestly. And like I say, when most of these folks get a check, they're looking at the dollars and cents. They're not looking at the percentage, respectfully, I think.
Yeah, until they start talking, if they got the same dollar increase, I agree with you. If everybody got, $2,500 increase, I agree with you. But if you got 2,500 and I got 1,900, well, you're different, you're the mayor, but I'm just talking people in similar departments. You're right, they're not going to compare percentages. More importantly, they will compare the dollar amounts. And that's where I think you can get some, it's still not doing me right type thing. But anyway, it's only $425,000 difference, but I do like across the board piece a little better. And then let's roll up the sleeves and do the work in the 22 budget. So hopefully they get a double benefit. They get whatever bonus we're going to approve, plus a pay increase going into the 22 year.
I think we're all on the same page there. No question about that. Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. So assuming that we are, I mean, I don't think you're calling for us to vote, right? You just want to just show us this is your recommendation to the Ways and Means full body of the council.
Has to vote on this, you know, we'd like to take it on the Ways and Means for approval next Tuesday. You've probably been reading in the paper, North Charleston has already done a bonus. Charleston County has, the city of Columbia has. I'd like to go ahead and take something on so our employees know that we have something coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll be on record. I'll be ready to vote whatever you recommend to the Ways and Means, Mayor. But so assuming that is going to be the orange column with the 425,000 addition, where will that money come from in the overall ARPA fund 10.5 million that we were dealing with a month ago?
So I'll get there. We had talked about before, whatever we do, we would take from the James E. Lewis Incubator site and the Navigation Center, because we could, in the second tranche, allocate more funds to those two projects later. So right. That's really what I did, but I'll show you the whole new reconciliation of that as we go along. So the other thing is, the mayor's office had asked for 150,000 to a critical needs fund for nonprofit groups that might need funding now versus waiting for the larger application process. So we do have an application online, and we have reached out to the community assistance and accommodations tax grant recipients we've had in the past to let them know that we do have this application out. And we gave them a deadline of the end of September to get those applications back in. We'll have an internal committee looking at those and making recommendations like we do normally for community assistance and accommodations tax, although this is just different funding and the requirements are a little bit different. So we do have that, but that process takes a little bit of time. And so we probably wouldn't get through that until, probably the end of the year, if not early 2022. So the funding wouldn't really, by the time we get through the process, we wouldn't be able to provide the funding for a while after. So this would be something immediate, sort of, if there were some critical need nonprofits out there. We are coming up with a separate application because we do need to document and have some kind of application because of the funding. It's federal funds, obviously. So this is just an additional pot of funds for some nonprofits, really, with critical need.
Amy?
Yes.
I don't know if this falls in this category, but actually last weekend, Labor Day weekend, was the Low Country Jazz Festival did happen. I attended 2 of the 3 days, and I brought Friday night. I brought words on behalf of Helen Hill, who couldn't be there, on behalf of CVB, and as part of those remarks, I just asked. The room was full, by the way. I just asked for a show of hands, how many people were from out of town. And Mr. Mayor and Council, I was shocked. It was over 70% of the people in the room threw their hands up. They came from out of town to attend that festival. Wow. Certainly putting, as we say, heads in beds. And Saturday night, a lady came up to Dr. Bell, and she wanted known that she flew in from Las Vegas to come to this festival. Well, it was the first event held at the Gilliard that required that you all, before you enter the building, you had to show your vaccination card, your driver's license to make sure that was, you, and obviously had to wear a mask. So everybody in attendance had been vaccinated and had a mask. And the show went on. So that, by the way, that's the policy of the Gilliard moving forward. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. I hope continued praise it goes that way. But they do have the policy if somebody says, I don't want to wear a mask and I'm not vaccinated, to give a refund back to that patron who bought a ticket. But, that's part of the strategy of moving beyond and continuing the economy, opening where you can open it. So I didn't know, Amy, whether I can talk to you on the other side of this one, but that's one of the shows that did not get canceled, and they had Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights events. And like I say, over 70% of the people that attended came in from out of town, which was hallelujah. So I don't know if they qualify for this or not.
Well, probably because they already had the event, I would say probably not. And then it's not accommodations tax money this year, Councilmember Waring. So the tourist part of it wouldn't matter anyway.
Okay.
But maybe for the next year.
I mean, they would get some money out of the fund because we're funding the ATAX grants.
Right. So so anybody that in 2020 that, because we cut their funding back, part of what we agreed to last meeting was to give them that other half. So they will get that.
Oh, good. Okay.
As long as they had expenses that they could show that in 2020, because I know we didn't have any funding in 2021. As long as they have expenses that are relevant and they actually had the event, then yes, we would give them their second half left remaining funds.
All right, good. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were on that list, that they had gotten some ATAX funds from us in 2020. So
that is correct, Mayor. Yes.
So
thank you.
Get a little bump.
It was great to see those hands go up, man. People coming in from out of town.
Well, that's fascinating. The fact that the place was practically full, you say that?
They had a white party. Everybody at the party, including myself, had a white suit on and a white outfit. And the ballroom, that definitely was capacity. And then I would say the concert was probably about, on Saturday night, probably about 75%. But that's still good, man. So,
that's great. That's great. Well, along those same lines, as you might see today in the press, that the city required that the Cooper River Bridge Run require their participants have either proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. And same kind of check will be done when they give out the bibs for them to enter the race. So I think it's just part of a new paradigm going forward. You know, until 9/11, you didn't have all those checks at the airport, right?
right.
Everybody's kind of gotten used to it now. So unfortunately, it looks like the world in the next little while, as far as COVID goes, this will not be out of the ordinary, and it is not already. The Boston Marathon, for example, was already advertising that's exactly what they would do at their upcoming race as well.
Okay.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order, Amy, or anyone?
Yeah, I still have some slides to go through, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
So and then the other thing was the Palmetto Artisan Program. This will be a 3-year contract. The cost for 2021 is $22,725. So we're requesting to use the ARPA funds for just this year, for just that $22,000. The remaining years would be budgeted in the general fund, and that is coming to council on Tuesday for approval.
And just to be clear, the total contract was I think something like 90,000, but this was the portion that was not budgeted through the general fund. Is that right, Amy?
Yeah, so it's $99,000 per year, and this will be the portion to take us through the rest of this year of that $99,000 or so. So this is what our new allocation would look like with the addition of the cost of the bonuses, and then the 150, the 22,725. Like I said, I took it equally from each one of those projects. So that's what would be remaining. It was $1 million for each of those projects before. And we would have no money left from the first tranche after that. The one thing that we need to determine is the grant awards that have the application process for. We never really decided on a number for that. So I say here, you know, community assistance funding usually was around $400,000 every year. Accommodations tax was around $2 million every year. We obviously would not be able to fund at that level, but we wanted to consider how much we want to fund so we would know in this allocation, how much we're going to fund. And then we'd have to take that from both of those projects. But we could also, because our next tranche will come in next June, if we did quarterly payments to whatever agencies we awarded funds to, we could pay the next 2 quarters, the last 2 quarters of the year with our second tranche, and just allocate the first 2 quarters out of this tranche as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have a number in mind? Based on 2.4 that we normally give out? And obviously the biggest portion of that would be the A-tax that we get, but
Go back to the, to that, and that wasn't part of the 638,412 you got showing there?
that's the 2020 applicants, Mayor, that we've said that we would give them the remaining funds that we could not pay them for because our revenues went so south.
Okay.
And you know you've got that much to give out?
Yeah, we went back and looked at all
Qualified.
that. Yes.
Amy, but won't we have ATAX funds to give out in the for the 2022 year? I mean, won't-
I don't know that, Rick. So we said that we would just do the ARPA funds until we get a better handle on accommodations tax.
Run that by me again. We wouldn't
When we
expect,
talked about it, we said we would just be doing ARPA funds. We wouldn't be doing community assistance or A-tax. That's what we had talked about the last meeting. So I hadn't taken A-tax into consideration because we weren't really sure with the costs that we have at the city to cover debt payments and things like that, the other things that we cover with A-tax, how much we would have left over for A-tax to give out.
I see.
Well, could you back into it and sort of figure out how much you think that we're going to be spending at the incubator site or the navigation site?
I
that
don't
would
have
be
costs.
eligible?
I don't really have costs on either one of those, Councilmember Jackson. That's a little bit of the problem, but we
Right.
obviously can allocate more. I mean, we could do maybe, $500,000 to $800,000,
Yeah.
allocate that out for these grants and just say that and decide going forward.
I mean, that was my gut that, you try to take those down to like half, 300 or something each. If we're not going to be spending anything for either of those two coming attraction.
We have a little bit of money set aside already for the James E. Lewis Center for some of the initial work going on over there, but nothing for construction.
Mhm.
We're hoping to get some from another source, but there's no guarantee.
Right.
But,
Well, when do we have to decide this? Can you ask us again or?
I can ask you. Yeah.
Get closer to something you can recommend. I feel like, we're just sort of stabbing in the dark.
Well, whatever we decided, that's the amount that we would give out. And we can say, okay, we can do, $400,000 from this tranche and $400,000 from the next tranche would get us $800,000. But my reason asking this question is because if we're going to do a budget amendment, then I need to kind of have a number in there to amend the budget with.
Okay.
But we could do that, and that would give us $800,000 to give out between the two tranches. If you want to commit $400,000 from the next tranche.
Amy, if you took the Lewis Incubator and the Navigation Center each down to 500, you'd have 400,000 in
Right.
this, and then 400,000 in the next tranche.
Right.
And then we could, with the next tranche of 10.5, we could make up whatever we need for Lewis and the Navigation Center with money that we'll get in June.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what you're planning.
Mhm.
sounds like a plan. Councilmember
Amy?
Shea?
Yeah, Amy, maybe I'm a little slow on the uptake on this, so be patient with me. to fully fund the incubator site and the navigation centers, how much?
I don't know that. We don't have the numbers yet because they're not even, so for the navigation center, we're not even at a point where we could even, it's just not to that point where we're getting any kind of design or anything else to know what the numbers are for either one of those sites.
So the allocation,
It's unknown.
so the allocation of $700,000 to both of those sites is really just sort of a shot in the dark to some extent.
It's actually a placeholder for both of them because we know there'll be more than $1 million. So we were, using those funds to set aside for those two projects. But I don't know the total cost of either one of those projects yet.
It's
So
kind of like,
if I could just sort of finish there, excuse me. So if we reduce them down to 500,000 each, and that gives us the 400,000 that Rick was mentioning, we're going to have to still come back up to this full funding at some other point.
That's
I mean,
right.
how much time do we have to get to that full funding? In other words, what we're doing is we're kicking the can down the street. I want to know how much longer we can kick the can down the street, because there's a real question.
Well, I think no matter what we did with the ARPA funds, I don't know that we would be able to fully fund those projects with them. We were just utilizing some of the funds at least to get us started on those projects. So I don't know the timeline of either one of those projects. The mayor might be able to speak to that better than I can. But what we said, Councilmember Shade, is we would just we would put the money back in this with the second tranche money, because we still have another $10.5 million coming next year.
Right.
And that's a 2024 commitment deadline, and we don't have to have it spent until 26, right?
Right.
So we have a lot of time on the second tranche.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just stay with me on this train of thought for a second, though. When do we think that we're going to have an idea of what those two incubator site and navigation is going to cost us in full? I mean, I know what we're doing. We're setting this money aside, and we'll be able to fund it some more next year. But do we have any idea how much we're totally going to need when that's going to come around?
I think I could respond to that. By the way, I look at both of these figures, even when it was $1 million, as kind of being a down payment towards getting these things done. Although the incubator site, we're not buying the building nor the land, but we're just doing a upfit. And, it's not going to be nearly as expensive as building a new building for the navigation center. But we'd probably get it priced out in the spring of next year for both of those. The second tranche will be available to us next May. So the funding would be available from that thereafter. The construction of James E. Lewis should be starting soon. We wouldn't need to do the upfit for at least another year from now, probably. The navigation center, probably the beginning of the next year.
And we'll get the next tranche in June, actually, Mayor, probably towards the end of June.
That helps. That helps with that explanation. So the idea of reducing those down to 500,000 makes a lot more sense now.
So Rick's idea sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will change that and adjust it for when we bring it to council. So that brings me to my next slide, which is if you're all okay with this new plan, then we can prepare the budget amendment and take it to council. Not this council meeting coming up Tuesday, but the last meeting in September. But I'm not sure if we shouldn't discuss it with all council before, just to make sure everybody's kind of on board and that it'll pass, and what would be the best way to do that.
I think we just bring it to Ways and Means.
Okay, so don't discuss, just bring it.
I mean, could you add an agenda item to the planning commission, the workshop we're going to have with them on the 23rd? Aren't we having an all council workshop?
I'm fine giving, a heads up to the rest of the council members at Ways and Means this coming meeting, even though we might not vote on it until the next one. And, but if, it sounds like the committee here is recommending this, so I don't know why we couldn't go ahead and bring it to them.
Is Amy, is the bonus discussion on Ways and Means on next week?
It's not a discussion because we didn't really necessarily have a plan. From what I understood, Jennifer had it just as a, for council to approve using funds for a bonus, but
Right.
not the bonus itself or what it was going to be.
But I think at that time you could discuss this whole plan during that Ways and Means discussion. So at least the full council would have it and know that they're going to be voting on it on the 20th. What is it, the 26th or 28th?
28. So Jennifer, do we need to change that line item on the agenda to say discussion of the use of ARPA funds? Because it's not just about the bonus, it's about everything.
Well, that's up to y'all. Right now on the agenda, it does have just the approval to use ARP funds as it relates to employee bonuses, but we noted that if approved by City Council, that there would be ordinances amending the budget that would be brought back at the September 28th meeting. So I mean, you don't have to take action on it, on Tuesday if you wanted to just have a discussion about that and other ARP items. But if it's the pleasure of council to amend it, I mean, we can do that.
I think during that discussion, Jennifer, council, if the Ways and Means approves using ARP funds for bonuses, at that discussion, we could also say we're bringing back to council on the 28th a budget amendment that would utilize all of the ARP funds. Like, you could have that discussion. You'd have to amend it, would you?
Correct. I mean, I think I don't think there's anything keeping, if you wanted to discuss that or bring that up as part of that discussion, I think it's okay, since technically you need an ordinance to be passed for it to be approved anyway. I think it's more just an approval to move it forward when those ordinances are ready to come to council.
That's fine. So I'll just have pretty much what I have in this presentation ready for Ways and Means on Tuesday.
Amy, let me ask a question. In the second tranche, I'm fast forwarding. We found a way to give pay raises in the 22 budget, through usage of our millage. The bonus that obviously we allocated this year, again, if we found pay raises into the 22 budget, we may not need that 33.2 or whatever million figure that we utilized this year. I mean, have you kind of factored that in, or you just kept the bonus in there just in case, we have another lean year in the second tranche?
I'm not sure I understand. So
in other words, next year we're going to get another
10.5 million.
Right, 10.5 million. Out of this allocation for this year, the first tranche, we had the amount you showed on the previous slide for the bonus.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If we, wait a minute. No, too far back. Anyway, I thought it was 3.2 million.
It is on the bottom, 3.27.
3.277. That's out of this initial tranche. Well, next year we get another equal tranche.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, are you allocating another 3.277 for a potential bonus out of the second tranche, or will
I'm hoping that we will be able to do something for our employees that wouldn't, necessarily. I know that Charleston County is already planning to give their employees a bonus with their second tranche. So I guess it would just depend on what we're able to do for our employees, if we would be able to allocate more funding for them in a bonus structure. But for me, for our employees, it's better if we can do something pay-wise for them.
I agree.
Bonuses. So this is great that we're going to be able to do this for them, but it doesn't help because we are falling behind again, like we did before. We had to do the whole pay structure. So doing something more permanent for our employees is really where we need to go with that. But if we needed to, then we can obviously allocate more, because it would mean that we weren't able to budget what we needed to budget for our employees for pay, and we could provide a bonus for them.
You did what I want you to do. The priority would be on increasing the pay on a permanent basis versus a bonus. Thanks.
So if we're good with this, I will put this together for Tuesday night to present to Council at Ways and Means what the ad hoc recommendation is, and we'll go from there. Then we'll have the budget amendment on the 28th with the ordinances attached as well.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. And does anybody have anything else? Any questions?
What will be our next department we'll be reviewing? Do you know?
Yes. It's September 22nd at 2, and police, fire, and information technology will be presenting that day.
Man, isn't that the anniversary of Hugo?
Ooh, oopsie. Well, I guess it's appropriate for police and fire to be reporting.
I don't remember the date. I was only 5 when Hugo came.
Yeah, I think it was September 22nd, 1989.
That's a day I'll never forget as well.
I'm telling you.
All of us who were here.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Amy, thank you so much. And thanks to our department heads and helpers who made presentations today.